Hello and welcome to Athletic Therapy Now, a podcast for athletic therapists by an athletic therapist. My name is Ashley Burr and I will be your host. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 10 of Athletic Therapy Now, Setting Boundaries as an Athletic Therapist. Our guest is Nikki Smith, and this is just a continuation from the podcast that we just recorded on referral networks and the ripple effect of a referral. And we decided, we finished the podcast, stopped the recording, and decided that we were finishing off that last podcast talking about boundaries, and that was getting out of that referral network side of things. So Nikki and I chose to hop on another call. We have not prepared anything for this. We have not. Normally I will send out a list of questions. So we just decided we would continue on with this. In the last podcast, we were talking about setting boundaries when you're out at a gathering, a party, a family's house, a friend's house, and when your clients, or not clients, when these people at this gathering come and ask you about an injury of theirs or advice on something because they know that you're a therapist, and how to handle that. So Nikki, thank you for continuing with this podcast. I know you've been thinking about some ideas over the last couple minutes, so do you want to start?
Yeah, I think to reiterate the situation where you're in that public forum, just to kind of start this one off specifically with setting boundaries. It's okay if you're comfortable with it to give some advice, right? Something that's going to be within your scope, obviously not something that's going to injure somebody. If you are comfortable doing so, say giving a stretch, some sort of pain management recommendation, heat ice, whatever. But what you will find, or has been my experience, and Ashley, I know your experience, is that it gets away from you. And next thing you know, you're doing a risk assessment in the middle of a party, or you're looking at somebody's back or something like that. And not only is that unprofessional, it isn't respecting yourself as as a professional, as a therapist, and you're not respecting your time. So for me, that very specific boundary that I set, which took me years and years and years to learn, is that I tell people I can't give you any more advice until we do a full assessment. Let's get you booked in, and then I'll pull up my phone and open up our calendar and get them booked in. So for me, I essentially sold my soul to doing free work, thinking that that would benefit my business in the future. And maybe it did. Um, and I'll go more into that later if I remember. But being able to put that line in the sand, A, is better for you, B, is better for the client, and C, it actually shows a level of professionalism that is good. And that's a good image to have. Yeah.
I agree. I I used to have a really hard time setting those boundaries in that side of it. I think right now I still have a little bit of a hard time setting boundaries. As as if you're listening to this and you've seen me as a client before, you know I hand out my phone number, my email address, and I often will respond at in the evening when I'm not at the clinic. I'll respond on my day offs. I'll book clients in instead of referring them to the online booking system. And those are things that I am comfortable with because I'm okay with it. And I tell my clients that if I don't respond, it's because I'm with my family and I have my phone turned off. But I'll get back to it when I have the time to get back to it. So I set that precedence, and which is also really important. But back to this setting boundaries when you're out at a gathering, I agree. It can be seen as unprofessional. It can be a way to sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I think that when you set that boundary, it shows more value in you.
Yes, exactly.
And when you don't have those boundaries, then you're setting that precedence that the client doesn't have to pay for your time and they don't have to pay for your advice. So now they look at it, okay, I just have a little wrist thing, so I'm going to make sure that I'm asking you for this, free advice, and I'm never going to come and see you because, whatever. And I will still, in a professional manner, emails, if a client is somebody that I've been seeing for a long time and they say, hey, like, what's that exercise that we needed to do for my wrist injury? I will still send them that, a video on that exercise. But for a client that I've never seen before, that I'm meeting for the first time at a party, or a gathering or anything like that, um, I don't want to set that precedence that I'm always going to give out free advice, and I'm not going to give them an hour of my time to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, Nikki had alluded to this already. It's okay to give some time. It's okay to give a little bit of information, but you have to know what your boundaries are, just like, and we said this in the last podcast, just like if you're going gambling, like, what are you okay with and what are you not okay with? And then set that definitive boundary. So in gambling, they talk in Manitoba, they talk about like set a $20 limit. Okay, so maybe when I'm working with clients, not working with clients, when I'm out and somebody has questions about something, I'll take the time to listen to them. Hey, I have a knee injury. I'm wondering if you can tell me about it. Okay, well, we can talk about it a little bit, but really the best way is to do an assessment in the clinic. And so we can book you in for an appointment. But why don't you tell me a little bit about it now? Or what have you tried, right? Like set what you're comfortable with, and maybe that's 5 minutes, or maybe you're not comfortable with it at all, and that is okay. You are not a rude person for telling people that you don't want to do your job when you're supposed to be on your leisure time.
I think I agree. I think too that people don't realize that, I mean, even 10 years in now, it's still you have to go into a different mode than visiting relaxed mode, right? You're switching modes in your brain, and that takes energy. And I don't think people realize that it isn't just a casual conversation for us, and you actually have to go back into your professional and educated and experienced brain and pull that information out. And I don't think people realize that that is work. So, and I do think that, at least for me, and I know Ashley, you're similar, that how we approach our barriers, and there's different ones, has changed over time throughout our career. And obviously that's okay. And it's going to be different person to person. And Ashley, when you were talking, that you actually brought up the next point that I had written down off the top of my head was communication. So when I started, private contractor, it was my personal number that was out there. And then when I created Revolution, my number was the business number for the longest time. And clients would text, and I would text back, and I would book people in. I would respond to emails. I would respond to phone calls. I basically sold my soul to my business, and I communicated with people, potential clients, current clients, for it could be anywhere from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, 7 days a week. And on one hand, I think if you want to start a business, sometimes that kind of commitment and sacrifice is what is required. On the other hand, I can tell you, I didn't have a family. I was living on my own. I was able to do that. And now, 10 years in, I have shifted away. The number I give is the business number. If I give my personal number, it's to a very, very, very select few. And I will tell them, don't worry about if you need to message me. It's usually my pregnant clients who are ready to give birth. But if you need to message me, if I can't be interrupted, don't worry about it. My phone is off. And I actually just turn my phone off now. But I very rarely give my personal number out anymore. But that's a choice that I have made. And that was probably 8 years in before I started doing that. Same thing with emails. I still have a hard time if I see a work email. Somebody asked a question about billing the other day, and I got up and I was awake at 5 a.m. and I responded to them at 5 a.m. I probably maybe shouldn't be doing that, but that's what else am I going to do at 5 a.m.? So I think setting those boundaries, if you want to set office hours, is good when you're first starting. That's also really hard starting out in this industry. And I'm going to stick it right here. starting in this industry, if you want to have a healthy work life balance, other people might disagree with me, but you will not. When you are starting, those boundaries are blurry and you will not have a healthy work life balance. As long as you understand that, and I think you're okay with that, and work toward building something that is going to give you a healthy work life balance, then for me, that worked. And you have to do what works for you. But as we know, athletic therapy is a very difficult industry to make a living in. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but those those boundaries initially will start very blurry, and that's I think that that's okay as long as you understand that you're working towards something more structured. Yeah.
I really like what you said there about when you started your business, and I think an important thing to keep in mind is that you're not just you. And
Yes.
that's the
Yeah.
difference between me and you is you are not just you. You have a business with multiple practitioners in it. And so when it was just you and you were trying to build that clientele and all your money was in your business, then that is worth it to you to work that 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., knowing that there's going to be an end to this and you're going to change it when you feel like you can afford a different alternative. But when you're starting off as a business owner with multiple practitioners, maybe that's not a financial option for you. Or maybe you set office hours and you turn that cell phone off, and that would look like maybe you have a personal cell phone and a business cell phone, which is an added expense, and you leave the cell phone at work. But you may miss opportunities from that. So you have to be okay with that. Or you get an online booking system and you refer to the online booking system, which again, there are clients who won't do that. So that can be missed opportunities. And I'm not saying everybody needs to be working 24/7, right? Like it's that doesn't
I
need to
don't
be the
recommend
thing.
it. I don't
No.
there's a you
And
see this gray hair? I don't recommend it.
and as a as a self-employed athletic therapist who's contracted, um I can say that half my clients book at the clinic and half of them will book, and I say clinic or online, and the other half will book via text message. And and I have set that boundary. By doing that, I've set that boundary that says, "Hey, if I don't respond, prompt me in like the next day because it just means that I'm with my son or I'm with my family and I am not looking at it at that time or I've forgotten about it if it's 24 hours later." So that is the boundary that I've set while still being okay with accepting those messages um, on my personal cell phone in the evenings. I get clients that will book full knowing that they are not going to get a hold of me in the middle of the night because I turn my phone off or I turn it onto silent and they know they're not going to get a hold of me. But they send the message because that's the time they're going to remember to do it. That's why I like online booking. It's so easy to book whenever you want to. I feel like I'm getting off topic here. So,
That is just great.
to to wrap that portion up, you have to set your own boundaries and you have to know what you're comfortable with. And as a new grad, maybe you're okay as a new grad without a partner and kids. Maybe you're okay with having that 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. office hour. I worked in the clinic. I had available hours when I first started 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yep.
because I wanted to make myself available for any time because I just needed clients. I started with nothing. I had 0 clients. My first month I had 1 client. My second month I had 2 clients. And then so on and so forth. But by making myself available as often as possible, I was able to build up my clientele fairly quickly into something where I could now I have very limited office hours. I work 9:30 to 2:15 3 days a week, and then I work 7 to 3 on Saturdays. And I've only gotten to that spot, in my opinion, because I started with allowing more office hours. It's just how athletic therapy is. Unless you're going into a place where you are given a full caseload, and that doesn't happen very often, you need to have, in my opinion, a little bit more of an open mindset with that. And then as you get those clients, yeah, start to pull it back. But also know that as you start to pull it back, it's not going to work with everybody's schedule. Um, so as you start to build those boundaries with your office hours, it can look like what Nikki did, where she had a cell phone specifically for work, or you stop giving out your number and you start referring them to the clinic number, and over time, it will transfer to that. It just takes time. And then we were talking about, yeah, I think that's that. What was your next point, Nikki?
Actually, my next point was hours of availability, so that was perfect timing. I I have nothing to add to what you say because as you know, I started the same way, and I agree. If you want to be successful in this career, you're going to have to make yourself available way more than anything that is logical or normal. And then as you become higher in demand, people will start rearranging their schedules for you instead of you rearranging your schedule for them. But you have to start on the side where you're rearranging your schedule for them. So, I mean, that's it. And then over time, you just condense it. Um, I actually, when the first thing I thought of when we were talking about boundaries was a conversation we had in our clinic a couple months ago, um, about boundaries. But this is changing a little bit into boundaries when working as a therapist. And actually, I'm super interested to hear your thoughts on this one because, especially since isolation during COVID, as therapists who were one of the few professionals who were able to continue to practice, we were the only social connection for some people for the entire week. And that seemed to be the line in the sand when it started, and it has continued on, at least in our industry and in our clinic from there, where we have a lot of clients who are crossing or trying to cross a professional boundary where they're they're sharing too much personally. They're talking about things that are inappropriate, um, things that you would use a different type of therapist for are coming up in our clinic and now starting to come up very frequently. So we actually had a conversation with all of the therapists and we brought somebody in to talk to us about how to set those boundaries to keep us safe and, um, make sure that we're addressing everything we can with the client um, without pushing them further. And I'll give an example. The first one that comes to mind is a, client who comes in, and people are very vulnerable, right? When you're working on them. And clients will tell you all sorts of stuff. Like stuff comes up all the time that's really personal, and that's fine. You're basically the hairdresser and the bartender of the therapy world. But then stuff comes up where you're thinking, I don't know if this is a red flag. Like this person has got suddenly they're becoming really dark. Their sense of humor, they're starting to talk about things like suicide, but they're making it in really dark jokes. But this is new, and they're starting to confide in you because they trust you. But a lot of the time, we're finding they trust us because we're not giving feedback. Talking to me about that stuff is like talking to a wall. I'm listening to it, but I'm not giving you any feedback. And a lot of the time, people are very comfortable with that because I'm not challenging them on anything. This is my opinion. But if they need help, and sometimes I'm going off on a tangent here, sometimes the conversation goes into a place that is not appropriate. And we were trying to figure out how we put that barrier there. And what I've been saying, and what apparently is the correct thing to do, is to say that you're concerned, that I'm personally very concerned about what you're saying. And it's okay to say, I'm personally very uncomfortable with this topic, which is not necessarily an easy thing to say to somebody, especially because they're usually sharing something that's very vulnerable, but it's not in my scope to address that either. And it's very important for people to understand where that boundary is. We are physical rehab professionals, not mental rehab professionals. So that barrier is extremely important, and being able to speak that barrier into existence really helps. And it's a simple, I'm not comfortable with this topic. I highly recommend you speak to somebody who has education and experience in this. And we now have a list in our clinic of different professionals that can help with different things. but that comes up with body dysmorphia, so anorexia, bulimia, stuff like that. That there's all sorts of stuff that is coming up now, a lot of mental health stuff that's coming up with depression that's getting, I would just say, out of hand, maybe where this person is at risk of something that it might not be good, or maybe abusing pain medication, stuff like that. So stuff is coming up. I don't know what your experience has been with it, Ashley, but stuff is coming up that is so far beyond our training. But a simple, I'm not comfortable with this conversation, just kind of lets them know you care, but it's crossing that line.
Yeah, so I have gotten a lot better at this because I used to be that blank wall and I just, here's a Kleenex
Mhm.
box.
Mhm.
Um, and part of that is part of how I was able to change how I respond to that is in part, I went to see a social worker myself after my pregnancy. Just I wanted coping mechanisms with becoming easily frustrated with things. And so I had a little bit of that experience of what that session would look like. So I was able to tell my clients about it, um, to give them like a heads up on what that would look like and to make them feel like they're not alone in the, seeking out mental health resources. But also, I have found since COVID that that mindset has shifted. So it used to be I'm not going to go see a psychologist or mental health professional or social worker to it's totally normal and completely normal to go and see a mental health therapist. I don't know if that's the correct term. Just encompassing all the people that you can chat with about your concerns and your mental well-being. And so almost always in an initial assessment, if somebody mentions a event that has happened, and that could be the death of a spouse, of a child, of a family member, um, if they've mentioned sexual assault or eating disorders or um, where they start crying about something or showing an emotion, I am completely okay with just saying, hey, I'm happy that you're comfortable sharing this with me, and you can continue to share these thoughts with me. But I need you to know that this is out of my scope of practice. And have you spoken with a psychologist or are you talking to somebody about this? 9 times out of 10, it's clients will say, yes, I have a psychologist that I'm talking to with this, or I've got somebody that I have an appointment next week, or you're right, I should reach out and I should talk to this person. So typically, the reaction is a lot more positive than I would expect it to be. I've never had anybody get mad at me, and those clients still feel comfortable sharing a little bit, but they also know I've set that boundary that is not my scope of practice, and I cannot give advice on it. But if they want to
Yes.
continue to talk, by all means, but just know that it is out of my scope. And I do
Yes.
the same thing with all of the other things, right? Nutrition, I follow the Canada's Food Guide. If it's past that, I'm not a nutritionist. Go chat with a nutritionist. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think that it's important if now this is coming further on and you've let it go on a little bit too long and you're getting uncomfortable. Um, I've never been in that position where I've felt uncomfortable with what somebody's shared with me. I have just gone back to the same approach from the first assessment where it's like, hey, I'm really happy that you're sharing this with me and I'm sorry this is happening to you. So I'm saying, thank you for being comfortable. I'm affirming that what is happening is a negative experience for them. And then I continue on and I say, this is out of my scope of practice and I don't know, I can't give you any advice on this.
Yes.
And then I carry on and I make that referral, that
Yeah.
recommendation. And I chart it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's all that we can do to set those boundaries.
Yes. I think part of, and historically for us, that has, and I say us, right? Our physios, our athletic therapists, even massage, myself, has been very effective. The reason we actually brought somebody into the clinic was because we're starting to get people where it's not effective. where we're laying down that boundary as soon as the as soon as it's coming up, right? And people are like I said, they're going to share all sorts of stuff with you and it's fine. But stuff that's coming up where it's like, "Ooh, this is concerning," and we're trying to refer out and like, "I'm happy that you're comfortable sharing with me, da 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 da." The answer we're starting to get from people is, "But my counselor, my psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever, I don't like talking to them. I'm not comfortable. I would rather talk to you." And that's we're actually starting to get resistance now with people, and I think that's why I said I think people in those cases are more comfortable talking to us because we're not trying to give them any tools. We're not trying to they're just talking, right? But we have had quite a few scenarios where it's it's actually not appropriate. People sharing thoughts about things that are maybe not even legal. So that has come up lately in our practice, which has been a very interesting experience. So just I think yeah, setting those boundaries and sticking with understanding your scope because every situation is going to be different. I even got an email the other day where I referred somebody to clinic with a K, um, or emergency, depending on where they were at. And you're going to get all sorts of scenarios, and each one really does need to be treated in on an individual case by case basis, but also to make sure you're being true to yourself and what you're comfortable with. Because what one therapist, physical rehab professional might be comfortable with, clients talk about sex all the time as an example, which is hilarious, but that's just they're vulnerable and they talk about that and believe it or not, a lot of people get injured that way. So it comes up. You hear it a lot. I'm very comfortable listening to people talk about it, but there are certain therapists that we have that are really uncomfortable, for example, about listening to people talk about it. So it's understanding, I think, what you're comfortable, what's in your scope, which is very important to protect you, but also what are you as an individual comfortable with? And that's going to be different. And I think that's okay. It's just being able to draw that boundary and make it clear for yourself and for the client.
Yeah, and I think to go on that, the big thing is what's in your scope, set your boundaries, refer out. And if it's something that is technically within your scope, if you take a course on it, so say somebody's having pelvic pain when they have sex, but you're not comfortable with it, or that's, out of your wheelhouse, you can refer on, or you can take a course on that to learn more
Yes.
about how to help those clients, right? So, yeah, I think the advice that you've given here is really helpful, and if you don't know how to handle these things, do what Nikki did and reach out to, I assume it was a psychologist. Yeah, reach out to a psychologist and
Yes.
ask them, or reach out to your association and ask them for advice on that. Um, yeah,
A mentor is
we're
another
gonna
good one.
yeah we're gonna pull this back to boundaries,
Yes.
um, in a different way because that is still setting boundaries. So far we've talked a little bit about boundaries at parties and boundaries um, around your schedule and boundaries with conversations in the clinic. And so we can finish this up kind of talking about, unless Nikki, you can let me know if there's anything else you wanted to add to this. Kind of talking about when it's appropriate to set those really strong boundaries. And we've alluded to it already. Um, but I think it's important to know that when you have that 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. schedule, that doesn't mean that you're working 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. It just means that you're available during those times. But as soon as you start to feel like you're becoming drained or it's too much, that is when it's really important to set those boundaries. Because maybe in that 5 a.m. to 11, 7 days a week, you're only seeing 6 clients. And the rest of the time you're doing other things. And that's an okay work-life balance as long as that works for you. But if you're seeing 10 clients a day within that timeline, maybe you need to pull back um, before you burn out. And that's going to be very individual. And so you have to know, again, what are you okay with and what are you not okay with? And by that, thinking about what you can handle, thinking about how to handle it. If there's things that you can source out, source those things out if you want to continue to see those clients, or start to rein it in and start to close it. If you don't want to work 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and that's what you're doing right now and you have clients at both ends, hey, sorry, you know what? This is no longer my availability as of a month from now. In a month, my availability will be Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays at this time, if you still want to be able to see those evening clients. But thinking about what you can handle, thinking about how you can shift that without creating this negative relationship with your clients. And it's either going to work or it's not going to work. You will probably lose clients, but you have to be okay with that.
Yes. You can also, um, like, for example, I still work Monday evenings. I work Monday evenings, and until the sun shines and it gets warm and I can get into the garden, I work every second Saturday, basically spring, fall, and winter, every second Saturday. So I work Monday evenings every second Saturday, and then I work different days throughout the week there too during the daytime. But that's how I've condensed and then shifted my schedule to try to accommodate current clients that I have. New clients, they can work around me or see another therapist. I have that option. But actually, I did have one question for you.
Hmm.
Family, boundaries and family with treatment.
I it it so that one's tough because it depends on um, insurance companies. Some insurance companies will allow you to treat family, some will not. And so if your family members want to go through insurance, you have to look at that first. I do treat some family members. Um, and that's something that I've set for myself. And I have um, my sister and I will tell her for every appointment she has to do a babysitting day. Like that's my
Ooh, great.
I have a 8-year-old, right? So like that's how I
Yeah.
navigate that. So I make it known that I'm not just working for free. But if I'm okay with working for free with family members, that's because I've set that boundary and I've gotten good at that. Um, and we'll trade back and forth with things that we can do because it's my sister, my brother, my aunt, my uncle, my parents. um, and so that's a tough one, and that's one that you have to be okay with. I'm okay with treating my family. I know therapists who won't do it because they feel like it gets a little bit too mucky. And so again, that's I think where you have to sit down, you have to decide, are you okay with that or are you not okay with that? The the positives that I see happening, with treating family members is that they might trust your feedback, they might trust your guidance. They might be more likely to see you when they have a very acute or new injury because they have that relationship. But on the other side of it, they might not trust your guidance. They might not believe in your guidance. And they might take advantage of it outside of that professional setting. So I think the important thing is to really make sure that you keep it in a professional setting, in that clinical setting, um, in my opinion, and really decide what you're comfortable with. And it might be different for each family member.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard
I
thing to navigate. And I think just setting those you have to know what you're okay with before you can set those boundaries. And the same thing happens with, and I'm just going to feed off of this, clients who, like I have a schedule that is 9:30 to 2:15 because I am the person that takes my kid to school and picks them up from school and takes them to their activities. That is what my role is in our family. Um, because my schedule is easier to navigate and I can change it up. And so I will have clients that try and push those boundaries, asking to see me earlier or later because I used to do that. I used to come in early or stay late when I didn't have a kid. And so I just have to have that quick answer of, no, I have to get home to pick my kid up. Or, no, I am not available at that time. You don't need to give them more information than that. You say, no, I'm unavailable. These are the times I am available. And they'll either work with you in that timeline or they'll see another therapist. But if somebody's not willing to respect your boundaries and respect that you're not working 24/7, maybe they're not the right client for you.
exactly. Yeah. Family's hard. Family's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's in our family, there's a very small, limited number that I will treat for free. One is my husband, the other is my parents, and that's it. I will not treat anybody in our family for free other than those people. And other than that, I actually try. It's nice being a clinic owner because when family books, we even our desk knows if that person is related to me, they actually try to book them with another therapist. Um, that's what we try to do, and that's something that I've just figured out over time is easier for me because if I see family outside of that, I instinctually want to ask them how things are going, and I'm just opening up the door to continue to work for free. But here's just an example that kind of ties us back to the first one about the social component, in that I have somebody in my family who years ago was having issues, and I went into their home and I did a full assessment, I did a full treatment, gave this person full homework for free, helping family out because that's what you do. That's what was in my brain. And 3 or 4 years later, this person came to see me in the clinic, had not done any of the things that I had recommended, and then I charged them. They're seeing me in the clinic. At that point, I had put that boundary up. I charged them, and my recommendations it was all the exact same stuff because this person never they didn't do any of their homework or anything. So nothing changed, but my recommendations as a paid professional carried more weight than me going and volunteering my time in their house. So I think as much as we think it's family, we take care of family, your your words hold more gravitas when you're getting paid. And that's simply a perceived value. It's human nature. When people are paying for something, they perceive that it is going to have more value than if it's for free. So I thought that I was helping. I wasn't. It would have been better off if I charged that individual. So I think that might tie things together really nicely.
Yeah, 100%. I have been there. It's
Yeah.
it's hard, and I mean there's so many things that you said there that I could just unpack and talk about more.
Yeah.
But now we're getting to over 30 minutes of this, which was supposed to be a
Yep.
short second podcast, or connection to that next to the last podcast. So that's Nikki, I feel like we could talk about this forever.
Boundaries are important.
Yeah. Yeah, setting
Yep.
one right now.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so just to are you okay if I go into a recap on this?
Go for it.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. So essentially the biggest things that we talked about, the recap for this episode, is it's okay to give some advice and free advice, but you have to be comfortable with doing so because it can get away from you. We want to make sure that when we're doing that, we're trying to be professional and maintain that professional view, because if we're in the middle of a party and we're doing a risk assessment, that's not really professional. So we might want to set that, okay, like here's your one thing you can do, here's your action item, but let's book an appointment in the clinic. Um, Thinking about communication, so that again, it's a boundary you have to decide if you're okay with. Nikki only gives clients her personal number if it's somebody who might just go into labor, but everything else gets referred through her clinic phone number. I choose to give out my phone number, and I set the boundary when I give it and say, I might not answer. So just know that. And then prompt me in a couple days if I haven't responded to your message. And starting out, maybe you do have to start from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. being available with that. Doesn't necessarily have to be those times, but you have to, again, figure out what you are okay with. What is your level of work that you're going to be okay with doing before you burn out? And when that gets to that point, how are you going to know you're at that point? And what is your plan for switching to decrease that exposure and that time that you're available? But that is a personal thing that you have to be okay with. And maybe some people are not okay with that. But just know that's going to affect how you're starting out if you're going from 0 clients. And if there's other ways around it, maybe there are other ways around it, and Nikki and I just haven't found it. Um, so then referring on for when it's out of your scope of practice, if clients coming in and they're talking about things that you're not comfortable with, they're talking about things that really they need to be seeing a mental health therapist with. Um, Big takeaways from that is, remember what's in your scope of practice. Refer out as soon as you can, set that boundary, refer out again if you need to, let clients know that you're not comfortable with that conversation. And if you're not sure, reach out to your associations and reach out to a psychologist yourself and talk to them about how to do that. Um, and then we started talking about family and how it can be really difficult setting those boundaries with your family. So once again, it all comes down to with boundaries, what are you comfortable with? What's going to make you happy? What's going to make you unhappy? And find that spot for you. Come up with a plan of how you're going to set those boundaries and what you're going to go through with going forward. Because as much as we think seeing our family members or friends and treating them for free is helping them, for some people, unless they're paying for your time, they will not see the value in it. And so maybe what you're doing is not helpful to them because they're not going to see that value and they're not going to take it at that same level of professional professionalism as if they were to pay you in the clinic. So, anything else that you wanted to add to that recap, Nikki?
Nope, it's great.
Okay, well, thank you for hopping on for a part two. And oh, so many more things that we could chat about. Again, if you want to find Nikki, can you share with us how you can be found?
You can find myself and our clinic, Revolution Rehab, at revolutionrehab.ca. Same thing on social media. So you can look us up on Facebook at Revolution Rehab and Instagram at revolution_rehab. Just Google us.
Perfect. And I will link those in the show notes as well. So thank you for coming on again today. See you later, Nikki.
Take care.